Arriving at college felt like the beginning of a new adventure, but sharing a room with someone made me anxious. I'd always valued my space and privacy, so the idea of sharing these intimate moments with a stranger wasn't easy to accept. When I met Lucas, though, he seemed like a good person. He had a shyness that showed in every gesture, a calm and reserved demeanor, as if he were in his own world. I quickly thought he, like me, was just trying to adapt to this new life. However, it didn't take long for small details to start making me uncomfortable, even though I tried to ignore the growing feeling of unease he caused me. In the first few days, some of his actions seemed innocent, and I tried to convince myself it was just curiosity. But one night I woke up with the distinct sensation of being watched. I opened my eyes slowly and found him sitting on his bed, motionless, staring at me in the dark. My body froze for a few moments, and when I managed to ask if everything was okay, he just smiled strangely and lay down again without saying a word. From then on, every interaction seemed loaded with silent tension. There was something in his eyes, something empty and deep, as if he were analyzing every detail of me, every movement, every breath. These moments began happening more frequently, and I started avoiding the room as much as I could. Whenever I returned, I felt his gaze following me, silent and intense. Even when I read or tried to focus on something, he remained there, watching, unblinking, as if studying my reactions. I tried to ignore it, tried to believe it was all in my head, but each nighttime encounter with that empty gaze brought an inexplicable chill. It was as if, with each passing night, he was closer, more focused, expecting something from me. No matter how hard I tried to stay calm, one thing was certain. His presence was becoming unbearably terrifying. That night, coming back from the library, I noticed a strong smell as I opened the door to our room. It was something chemical, a heavy odor that seemed to invade my lungs and make my nostrils burn. As I crossed the threshold, I found Lucas on the floor, holding a knife and observing it with an almost hypnotic concentration. When he noticed my presence, he looked up and, without losing his smile, murmured that he was just playing around. My entire body froze. Part of me wanted to laugh, maybe to ease the tension, but another part wanted to run out of there as fast as possible. Not wanting to reveal the panic bubbling inside me, I walked straight to my bed, turned my back, and forced myself to breathe, trying to push away the thoughts that were beginning to consume me. Lying there, eyes open in the darkness, scenes from movies and stories of psychopaths flooded my mind. The stories I'd read online, the details of each case. All of it seemed to resurface in that room, painting horrific scenes that kept me from closing my eyes. Every move Lucas made, every faint noise from the bed beside me, only intensified the fear. That night was torture. I felt as if I were being hunted, as if at any moment something terrible would happen. The night seemed endless, and the mere sound of his breathing was enough to make my heart race. I knew I had to do something. Living together was already affecting me deeply. The next morning, determined to change the situation, I went to the dorm supervisor. I explained that Lucas made me uncomfortable, that something was wrong with his behavior, but my words seemed vague and exaggerated to the supervisor. Without concrete proof, he thought I was overreacting. I left the office with a suffocating sense of helplessness, and the fear now felt even more real, heavier. That night I locked the door from the inside and, almost as a last resort for safety, hid a kitchen knife under my pillow. Something told me I needed to be ready, but I could never have imagined how close I was to a night of pure terror. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a strange sound, slow footsteps echoing through the room. At first, I thought it was just a dream, but I soon realized the sound was close, coming from within the room itself. I opened my eyes slowly, trying not to make any noise. and saw Lucas standing in the middle of the room. He was holding the same knife I had hidden under the pillow, his fingers gripping the handle tightly. He was muttering disconnected words, as if in a trance, staring intently at the blade. My body froze, and every cell in me screamed to run, but fear immobilized me. When he took a step toward me, panic exploded inside me. The scream escaped almost without my realizing it, and I jumped out of bed, running to the door without looking back. The commotion and my shouts attracted other students, and within seconds the hallway was full of people. Someone called campus security, who arrived quickly and restrained Lucas. The scene felt surreal, like a nightmare that wouldn't end upon waking. Seeing his state, muttering incomprehensible things while being led away by the security guards, I understood that Lucas was not in his right mind. It was as if he were possessed by something dark, a force that controlled him and pushed him to do things he might not even fully realize. The shock still reverberated within me, and it was hard to believe that all of it was really happening. After that night, I never went back to that room. I was informed that Lucas was sent for a psychiatric evaluation, and only then did I discover that he had a history of aggressive behavior, something they had kept silent and that no one had mentioned to me before. Despite the relief of not having to see him again, the fear never truly went away. The empty look he cast that last night and the sound of footsteps still haunt my thoughts. Sometimes it feels as though, somewhere in a dark corner, he's still lurking, just waiting for the right moment to appear again. Even with time, this memory pursues me, a shadow that never really disappears. A few years ago, I worked for a company that organized conferences all over the country. It was interesting work, but there was one strict rule. To save costs, we always had to share a room with a colleague during trips. At first, this made me anxious. After all, not everyone in the office was close, and the idea of spending nights with someone I barely knew wasn't exactly comfortable. Luckily, I was assigned to room with Clara, a colleague I'd always admired. Clara was one of those people with an infectious energy who made any moment lighter and more fun. Outgoing and charismatic, she quickly became the center of attention in conversations and always found a way to make the environment pleasant. But upon arriving at the hotel on this particular trip, I noticed something strange. Clara seemed different, as if all her liveliness had drained away suddenly. As soon as we got off the plane, I noticed she was quieter than usual, her eyes carrying a deep exhaustion, almost as if they had lost their sparkle. During check-in, she barely spoke, and the smile that usually lit up her face was gone, replaced by a serious, almost somber expression. When we finally got to the room, I asked if she was okay, to which she responded with a nod and a forced smile, saying she was just tired from the trip. Yet that vacant expression didn't seem like ordinary fatigue. When we went to dinner later, our conversation was brief and odd, as if she were there, but with her mind miles away. Soon after, Clara said she needed to go to bed early, and I respected her request, trying not to worry. When I finally entered the room to sleep, Clara was already lying down, motionless, but the atmosphere felt heavy, almost suffocating. As soon as I turned off the lights, I heard a faint murmur. At first, I thought it was some noise from outside, but I quickly realized it was Clara. She was whispering something, disjointed words, meaningless, as if she were talking to someone invisible. Her eyes were half open, fixed on some point on the ceiling, and her face looked tense. The scene was so disturbing that I felt paralyzed, unsure whether to wake her or ignore it. I decided to try to sleep, but with every whisper that escaped Clara's lips, a sense of discomfort washed over me, as if I were witnessing something I shouldn't be seeing. The next morning, things took an even more unsettling turn. Clara seemed entirely oblivious to what had happened the night before. When I mentioned the whispers I'd heard, She looked at me with a blank expression as if she didn't understand the question, then let out a humorless laugh. Those laughs didn't seem genuine. There was something about the way she acted that made me uneasy. Throughout the day, I noticed she avoided making eye contact with me, frequently whispering inaudible words to herself. When I finally asked if everything was all right, she responded in a peculiar tone, "I feel more alive than ever." That phrase sent chills down my spine, setting off an alert in my mind, but I tried to stay calm. It was clear that something was wrong, but maybe she was just exhausted and needed some rest. As the day went on, Clara's strange behavior persisted, and what she said next only deepened my concern. "Tonight I won't be alone. Maybe you should be ready." That phrase echoed in my mind, and with each passing moment, the weight of anxiety grew heavier. That night, when I returned to our room, a chill ran down my spine. As I opened the door, I found Clara standing by the window, motionless, as if hypnotized by the emptiness outside. Her face was a mask of apathy, and her eyes, once so vibrant, now held a dark and haunting gleam that made me hesitate. Instead of asking what she was doing, a sense of dread took over me, because before I could even form the question, Clara began murmuring in a distant, drawn-out tone. The atmosphere around us seemed to shift. Every word that left her lips sent a wave of discomfort through me, as if the very air was tightening. The room, once a cozy space, now felt small and oppressive, as if an unseen shadow were wrapping around us. The sense that something, or someone, uninvited was present grew stronger with every whisper Clara uttered. My heart pounded, and a primal urge to flee seized me. The air felt heavy, almost impossible to breathe, as I wondered if it was possible that something dark had indeed invaded our space, something that didn't belong here but now seemed to settle disturbingly between us. When Clara finally looked at me again, the transformation in her eyes was undeniable. There was something profoundly inhuman in her gaze, an emptiness that seemed beyond human understanding. She whispered with disturbing calm, "She's going to set me free," accompanied by a smile I'd never seen on her face before. It was a smile that didn't belong to her. It looked more like a mask, something that hid Clara's true essence. My instincts screamed for me to run, but paralyzed by fear, my feet felt rooted to the ground. Terror settled in my chest, making my body tremble, unable to respond to the unbearable reality before me. Then, in an abrupt movement, Clara threw herself onto the bed, as if everything had returned to normal, and started laughing. A cold, soulless laugh that reverberated through the room, echoing in my mind as a harbinger of something terrible. Afterward, she fell asleep, as if nothing had happened, leaving me alone with my terrifying thoughts. I spent the night awake, tormented by the hope that morning would bring back the Clara I knew, the fun-loving, lively Clara. But when daylight finally came through the window, bringing sunlight into the room, she awoke with a serene, carefree expression, acting as if nothing from the previous night had occurred. On the way to the conference, Clara was the same as before, lively, talkative, and full of energy. However, inside me, an uneasiness grew. I knew that was only a facade, a mask she wore to hide what had truly happened. The discomfort followed me throughout the day like a persistent shadow, and I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. In that moment, the Clara I once knew no longer existed in the same way. Something had changed irreversibly, and every time I saw her smile, I remembered the cold laughter echoing in my thoughts. A part of me wanted to forget, but I couldn't. When I close my eyes at night, I still hear that laughter, and the image of Clara's eyes, so vacant and distant, haunts me. She wasn't alone that night, and the certainty that something had accompanied her, something that shouldn't have been there, consumed me. Now, the memory of that experience haunts me like a waking nightmare, a truth I can't ignore, and the figure of Clara has become a mystery, shrouded in darkness that I may never be able to fully unravel.